Joining me now, Democrat from Illinois, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Thanks for joining me tonight, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Is Eric Cantor right? Is it possible to, as he put it, find a bipartisan agreement? That means you, Congresswoman, a bipartisan agreement on savings from mandatory programs that can be agreed to without tax increases.
There's no way. If we don't put the millionaires and billionaires and the corporations that aren't paying any taxes or getting breaks to put our jobs overseas, or the oil companies, and we go after entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, you know, if this doesn't bring people to the streets, I don't know what will. They certainly bring them to the phones, because I'm already getting calls. We've been getting calls through this whole period, people sobbing about not being able to rely on their Social Security check. Are they going to get cut? Are they going to get it at all? I mean, the gall of them to say that all of this ought to come from cuts that fall most heavily on the seniors, on middle-class people, people who aspire to the middle class. This is not the America that most people want to see.
Now, we heard the president hoping that the silver lining of the S&P rating politically, in terms of reaching an agreement on taxation, is that it would open up this tax question, especially since in the S&P report they actually say that letting the Bush tax cuts lapse would actually help the situation. Do you think there's any chance that Republicans will read that sentence of the S&P report and think, oh, okay, let's follow Wall Street's guidance on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, the chutzpah, the gall of Standard & Poor's to say, well, they simply don't believe that the president is going to let the tax cuts for the rich lapse. I mean, you know, if they're going to get into the realm of politics, then they ought to talk to their buddies on Wall Street, hedge fund managers that are paying 15% taxes while their secretaries are paying at the top rate, or paying more taxes than they do. And of course, since John Boehner and other leaders have said, we're not going to appoint anybody to the committee who's willing to raise taxes, the outlook looks pretty grim. But of course, as you know, there is a trigger there that says that if the super committee doesn't make an agreement, then there are cuts that go into effect automatically from defense, from other spending, and from Medicare. And so, you know, any way you look at it, if the Republicans don't turn around and the American people don't make them turn around and put revenue on the table, we're in big trouble.
Congresswoman, there's another way to get revenue on the table, which, of course, is the lost point of this whole spending cuts as the road to prosperity debate. And that is, of course, as you know, growing the labor force, having more taxpayers out there, more people employed, more payroll taxes actually being withheld every week. Exactly. Is there any prospect that there could be anything legislated by Congress that could actually help the job situation?
Well, first of all, let me emphasize your point. If you listen just to Washington, you would think that there are only two ways, and that's revenue or that we cut. And the third and best way, and the way that we've always gotten out of recessions, is growth, growing the economy, and that spells jobs. And that's why this week I'm going to introduce a bill that, you know, if you want to create jobs, create them. And my legislation would actually make sure that we can hire over 2 million people at a very reasonable price, all paid for by taxing the wealthiest, the millionaires and billionaires, and put them to work doing things that need to be done. And 2 to 1 Americans say that jobs is a more important issue than debt reduction, that we got to put Americans to work in order to get them moving and get the economy moving. I hope so. I hope that there is some resonance to the idea in Congress, something that's supported by the vast majority of Americans, that we need to create jobs.
Congresswoman, I've read your bill, and I'm actually surprised at how, in relative terms, cheap it is to get those 2 million people to work at jobs that we need doing. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, thank you very much for joining us tonight.